Will the iPhone X be delayed? Will Project Fi finally get another compatible phone? And how long should manufacturers support less expensive devices? Plus, TK Bay joins the show this week to help us unpack the Google and HTC partnership announcement. We've got a lot to talk about, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 271 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Recorded September 21st at noon Pacific time, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphones, tablets, and wearables. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, joined as always by plucky podcast producer, Mr. Jules Wong. How's it going out there on the East Coast, buddy boy?
Yeah, you've been mentioning November for the past couple of weeks, so it's a good thing you got that in there.
Someone had said something because it was a brain
schism
typo. I mean like someone on the show, not like a comment or something. I go through reading the comments. Please.
Well, I feel bad about it. Apologize. There you go.
Well, we'll both apologize. Me for being wrong and you for not telling me I was wrong. And of course, joining us live via Hangouts is LA-based tech reviewer, Mr. TK Bay. Welcome to the show, my good friend.
Thank you very much, and very happy to be back on the show. Missed you guys. You guys have been having too much fun without me, man. Glad to be back.
That's true. We needed you to come back and help reduce the amount of fun that we've got.
We got to center everything back.
Don't need to be jealous, please.
Actually, so I'm going to try not to choke on. I'm still working off that stupid cough. I'm still from pre-IFA. That congestion that I've been fighting is still going.
I mean, so while with you, talk about how much I love this polar seltzer over here. Also, in the social medias, we got a good discussion going on today's topic. So why don't you head on over to Twitter as we are live and do the hashtag PN Weekly and just ask a few questions while we are able to answer them live. And if you can't make it, if you are listening to this after the post, then you can just head on over to your email client and type in podcast@pocketnow.com along with your questions and thoughts and whatever you might have, flotsam, jetsam, and all of that. Hashtag PN Weekly, podcast@pocketnow.com. Many ways to connect.
We're really good with the flotsam and the jetsam, if you haven't noticed, both literally and figuratively, as I am about to clear my throat once again. That was a good one.
I was about to burp.
This is the worst podcast ever. I love it. I'm so glad that we actually have a bye week on having a sponsor this go.
Podcasting for audio's sake has never been a strong suit.
Well,
to be
we've got. I want to kick right off. I want to jump right in. This is the biggest news story of the week. The teases have been coming like crazy. Number of rumors, speculation about the status of HTC, one of our favorite but beleaguered brands. And news finally dropped that HTC is partnering with Google. We're not looking at an outright acquisition. The details of the plan, $1.1 billion, about half of HTC's smartphone talent is just going to live over at Google now. And this is also going to be a non-exclusive partnership for all of HTC's patent, IP, and licensing deals. So HTC can still partner with other manufacturers. Google can still work with other manufacturers, but Google has got a pretty good stake in HTC's talent and IP. TK, I just wanted to jump in immediately. Just your first reactions when you heard this news. Like, we were all really confident this was going to be an outright acquisition, but HTC as a brand lives on to fight another day. They're flush with an extra $1 billion in cash. How did you feel? What was your reaction when the news actually finally delivered last night?
It was a little bit of a mixed bag for me, but the general feeling overall was, I think this is a natural transition. I think they've been working with each other for a long time, and we, as a consumer or even reviewer, we've seen how HTC's brand been doing, and the way they've been performing for the last few years. With since even the M10 last year, they progressed as far as making better hardware, but they're having a hard time getting people to identify them. But their biggest performer has been the Pixel from last year, the Pixel XL. I still use it, and as we know, rumored to be the next manufacturer for the next one down the road. I think it was a natural think of it like they've been playing with each other for a while. It's finally, official now. They're dating.
Well, I mean, I almost want to say they're engaged now. It's like they've been courting each other for the past.
A little bit more official. You're right. They did present the ring, the 11, that $1 billion ring.
$1.1 billion carats. No, that's not right. No, they made a big spectacle in their press release out of talking about their continued partnership. This is a relationship that has been delivering products since the original T-Mobile. What was it? The
G1.
First Android, the G1.
It was the first one with the QWERTY sliding keyboard. Everybody was on board. Right. It was an amazing device. Yeah, I remember. I had
combined that with the first Nexus device, and then obviously, I think most recently people are pointing to the Pixel as HTC's engineering talent. Digging into the details of this, I have to say I was a little concerned when we finally got the numbers on how many people were actually going to be making this transition. There's a workforce of roughly 4,000 engineers, and half of this team is just going to live over at Google now. What do you think? I mean, because obviously I think this is a boon for Google. I don't think any part of this deal looks bad from Google's perspective.
No.
But what do you think this means for the next generation of HTC products? Like, they're losing that team that also would have been communicating about what Google was doing with the Pixel. I think you lose some insight there, don't you think?
They're losing a big part of their the group. Well, so the team that put together the Pixel XL, and if you've used the Pixel XL, you'll notice a lot of resemblance to some other devices that they released during the same year. So we can definitely see that the core people that are making this high-end level of hardware is leaving. So it's a very concerning position for HTC's mobile division. And as you know, we got to look at them in different divisions. There are different parts of this company. HTC as a whole is not just one company that produces, mobile devices, or, and you still have the HTC Vive section that still has to thrive and move forward. So it's concerning from that aspect. How are they going to be able to basically now make a stand in the US market, even in Europe, outside of the mid-rangers, which is what they've been running off of for a while, like the Desire line of devices, right. All the other ones that people may not be well aware of, but the U11, those are flagship devices. But HTC makes a lot of other mid-rangers that may end up being their bread and butter for some time, especially since they're losing those key people that are pitching all those high-end devices, like the Pixel XL. And we'll see how the new version of the hardware comes out and how it handles, comparing it to last year. Everybody's excited about that, but it is concerning that HTC may be, or the mobile division may be maybe they need to, invent something new. Maybe they need to try to really think outside of the box now and try to get back that confidence in the US.
So, I mean, you were very diplomatic in how you were putting that, and obviously, yeah. I don't mind engaging in a little tiny bit of wild speculation. We do know that there are plans for obviously a next year of devices, and anything that HTC is talking about today, we know that they probably have a pipeline, 2 to 3 years worth
of course.
Of hardware that's sort of being planned for the next generations of HTC products. So on Pocketnow, we did post a story talking about the Ocean Master, the Ocean Light, the Ocean Harmony. But outside of what they might be able to do over the next year, after I had a little time to kind of sit and chew through all of the information that Google and HTC delivered in their press releases, this to me really started to feel like this could be a good long acquisition move.
Yeah.
Eventually, HTC is carved up into, like you were saying, the various divisions that make other products, entry level and mid-ranger phones, flagship and premium devices, and then Vive is another part of their hardware strategy as well. But it's a completely different operating, team that's developing for that. And so I kind of feel like if HTC and Google had just pulled the trigger day one, HTC's gone. These letters don't exist anymore. We're scrambling to try and find a home for the Vive or a buyout deal for the Vive's technology. And next year, it's all going to be the Pixel. I think there would have been a lot of negative sentiment or a lot of negative reaction to that deal. But you start over with the flagship tier of engineers and developers. You move them over to Google. You sort out who might be redundant, what divisions might not necessarily be needed anymore. You keep a couple thousand people back at HTC just to see, will they rise to the occasion? Without their premium flagship counterparts, maybe the company struggles to execute at the high end after about 3 years. And then you can kind of just fold that over while you've got plenty of time to figure out what you want to do with the Vive and how that's going to exist on its own. And that to me kind of felt like at first, my reactions were overwhelmingly positive. I love that HTC sticking around. This is a company that I have a very long relationship with. And I want to see them more competitive in the market. They've got $1 billion in cash. They can definitely do something with that. But the more I started to think about it, the more I felt like this feels like a lobster pot move to get people slowly acclimated to this change without rocking the boat and without Google taking on too much baggage. They don't acquire any debt. They don't have to instantly lay off 1,000 people if they're redundant. They've got a lot of time to kind of sort these things out as the next 2 generations of phone are produced.
Well, and also keep in mind, this isn't Google's first attempt to working with an OEM. So they've learned a lot from Motorola / where, Motorola is now. And I, for one, was sad when they let Motorola go. And I really thought it was a very good thing for the product, for the brand. But I think what they've learned from that is keep it under, Google's name brand, the Pixel device, no longer calling it an HTC. And, letting HTC still function at this point in time makes it easier to, like you said, accept it down the road if suddenly this entire team, becomes, they're all Google staff at some point, and HTC is like, look, we're just focusing on other devices or low range, mid range devices for other companies or other channels to be able to brand and get those out there. It's something that we have to wait and see. Honestly, at this point, I think it's exciting because if anything, they're gonna definitely get their stocks should reflect a gain. They just got a bump, a lot of cash pulled in.
Have to be excited about
yeah. So financially, I think it's a win-win. The reality is they've been working together for such a long time that it's a natural progression. I'm just hoping at the end of the day that we don't get into that where Google controls both sides of the hardware and the software, where we don't get that much innovation on the hardware. The reason why the Pixel XL was so great last year is because HTC developed the hardware and put that sensor in there and set up everything, and Google built on that. Google didn't control everything into that. That sensor was there in other devices during that year. So you have to have some, you have to have talent that comes in a little bit from the outside, bringing fresh ideas. So we'll have to see next year's lineup. You're right; it's a little early to see where we are now.
I mostly, sorry, I had 3 different sentences that I tried to get out all at the same time. That happens to me a lot these days. No, I largely agree with you that we don't want Google to start feeling too stagnant. But I think this is also one of those things that Google is addressing in a way where they've had something of a branding problem. Where if you say Android, most people are going to think Galaxy, and that's not really Android. It's this Android, under these Android
it's a skin.
Yeah, exactly. But you're not really
a version of Android, exactly.
Totally. And so you have more opportunities to kind of peel consumers away from Google services and have them using Samsung services, right? So one thing I do want to circle back to is for all of the concerns that we've had, people that have been shooting us comments and people that have been joining this conversation, this really does to me seem like if eventually there is more of an acquisition, or if HTC folds, that they're going about this in completely the anti-Motorola way. That whatever mistakes were made, almost beat for beat, this is the opposite way of how they handled Motorola as a company.
Nope. Exactly. They didn't take on the whole company. They didn't decide to say, oh, everything comes in. They're keeping it very strategic. As you said, they can still work with other companies. HTC is not tied to Google. But I think it's a win-win. I think Google's definitely making the right move, the smart move this year. And I think as a consumer, we only have to basically get the best hardware, and hopefully we'll be really pleased with the the hardware coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, I know I'll be super sad if it's totally true. I think it's very likely to be true at this point, especially if HTC's division has been more of a guiding force on the hardware, that will be losing that headphone jack. But otherwise, it looks like
it's
for a pretty sweet device.
Yes, 2017. It'll be basically the last year we see headphone jacks. It's sad.
I don't know.
Yes.
I bet there are probably going to be some holdovers in 2018. I'm willing to bet that the first phone Huawei releases in 2018 will still have a headphone jack, and maybe even Samsung. And then by the end of 2018, the beginning of 2019, they'll all just be gone, and we'll all be sad. And everyone will grumble about it and complain, but no one will really do anything to buy phones that still have headphone jacks. So
well, yeah, no, it's a sad truth. I see them disappearing on a daily basis, but
right.
We'll have to.
Endangered species.
It truly is. It's sad, but when you do get it on, let's say, Note 8 right now, it's refreshing to see that you get a high-end device, Note capabilities, all those things you get, and you still get you get waterproofing with the 3.5 millimeter the headphone jack and the S Pen. You can take that thing and go in the water. I went with my kid a couple of weeks ago just to play in the pool. I was using the S Pen underwater. That's amazing. There's space for all of this. We got to stop. I think there's a video. I don't know if you've ever seen this. There's a guy that installed a headphone jack within an iPhone 7.
That. Like, apparently everything's still there. It's not even like Apple really saved any space. It was
no. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, why does this not have more views? People need to know. So yeah, the need for it, I think it's truly driven by Apple. I think at this point, in it just more, they think we don't need it, and they're trying to sell us dongles. So I think
I think that's actually kind of one of the most important aspects of the mobile technology market, is looking at, can you also convince the consumer that they need a value add-on accessory purchase? When you buy the phone, it's not just enough to buy the phone. Can you also get that consumer to leave with a case? It used to be, can you leave with a case and a memory card and a screen protector? And now it's also a nice pair of headphones, but not just a nice pair of headphones, but a pair of Bluetooth headphones, because those are more expensive. And those also come with value add-ons, like maybe you need an additional cable or a charger or something like that. And so I think it's pretty clear why this has been such a, because it's not necessarily about improving the consumer experience. The V series of LG phones pretty much wrecks that hypothesis. It's more, you get to create behavior that benefits the bottom line when you're going in to buy that phone.
So the last thing I want to touch on that headphone, and it's really the missing part that I haven't seen really even manufacturers pick up on it, is decent headphones that are USB Type-C compatible, and the lack of standardization.
Totally.
So you don't get that anymore. You're not getting, you get HTC putting in their own little adapter, proprietary, or Motorola doing the same thing, and you forget that one adapter, you're stuck without headphones, and you are going to have to rely, on hopefully what Android Oreo is going to be bringing into the table, better audio processing built into Android, and having true aptX support natively supported.
Have you played with Android O there? Because I've tried 2 different USB mics and a USB DAC, and I had varying results on what worked and what didn't.
So my experience as far as just using the actual built-in DAC and using the audio processing on it, it's been very nice. I've heard some people having some issues using the USB Type-C connector to be able to play audio. It hasn't been 100%. Remember, Oreo just officially became an actual release a few weeks ago, maybe about a month or so ago. But I enjoy using my Pixel XL. It's a secondary device. I carry 2 phones, and I'm very happy to see that Oreo is addressing it, finally addressing audio quality. You go into developer option, you can set aptX support, you can set the quality of the audio, the output levels. You just didn't have these things before. So we just need to see how the adoption of Oreo comes around, and hopefully the V30 gets it first. I don't know. I'm crossing my fingers there.
I really want to see V30 with that kind of hard-coded audio experience built into it. It was one of the things I was having a conversation. If the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack has to die, the biggest stumbling block that we faced, you were mentioning, is this terrible support for true USB audio input output standard. I mean, baked into Linux, sort of the kernel that drives Android, and yet we've seen very little movement for people who care about a cabled connection to arrive at that kind of solution. And one of the companies I was talking to at IFA, I struck up a conversation with one of the engineers at Sennheiser, and I'm a Sennheiser whore. I love their gear. if you're going to remove traditional audio hardware from a smartphone, I'm actually not too angsty about that if I can invest in something that I know is going to play universally across my various gadgets. So, you know, I've got a USB ports and a USB-C port on my laptop. I should be able to unplug from my phone and plug into my laptop. And if Sennheiser is responsible for the DAC and the amp powering those headphones, I'm going to be a really happy camper, because then it won't matter if I have like some $200, you know, entry-level smartphone, some, you know, $1,000 premium smartphone. I know my headphone quality remains consistent across any device that I might plug them into. But I don't think we can get there until we know that these products have proper USB audio support. And that to me seems like it's still a couple years away
at the bare minimum. Yep.
At the bare minimum, from a tipping point of Android manufacturers getting there. You know, Android O is out, but I mean, what's the market share on Nougat? It's still crazy low.
It's extremely low, up to
1% in that range. And I think the ultimate solution would be to have a licensing program like Made for iPhone instead of Made for Android, you know, and have that as part of a, you know, licensed accessory bin. So that's the only way that you can do it. I think Android and HTC or Google and HTC working together in order to bring that about, because HTC has been a clear offender on this with those Sonics, right?
I think the danger of having that licensing, though, is it probably stands just to create yet another division. You know, like, this is compatible with HTC Google stuff, doesn't necessarily mean that it's built on just the basic USB audio protocol, which all phones should have access to, but the way that Android layers on top of that audio stack creates additional latency, so no one really bothers to try and implement it. If we could address that, then it really wouldn't matter. I mean, you should be able to plug, just like on the iPhone, you should be able to plug any USB mic, any USB audio interface. I've got a portable recorder that plays great with my iPhone. I've got a high quality professional recording interface that plays great with my iPhone. This shouldn't be a problem. It should just work. We probably should wrap this up on the HTC. I do want to chew through a couple of the tweets that we've been getting. This is from Ritesh. He actually tweeted us 11 hours before we started broadcasting, using the PN Weekly hashtag. With Google acquiring HTC, well, now we know that wasn't an actual acquisition. Do you think if the red HTC U11 had been a Pixel phone, it would have been a super success? He thinks so. Do you think having a pretty red option would have made the Pixel a bigger deal, TK? Or do you think that it still would have been just as constrained in terms of manufacturing and shipping?
I think, you know, actually, I have to say, yeah. I mean, if the U11, that shiny red phone, and having just, you know, Google on the back of that, I think that would be an amazing device. Getting it, yeah, I mean, I think the design, we all love our Google devices or our Pixel devices, not necessarily for the way they look. It's because of what they can do. To this day, the camera on the Pixel XL or the Pixel devices is, I think, in my opinion, the #1 of 2017 still. And it came out last year. So when you look at it in that sense, it's hard to tell, you know, is it making sexier would work? But I think it couldn't hurt. I think Google definitely would have been all over that. Verizon would have loved it. Can you try to put that red check mark on top of that?
Exactly what I was going to say is Verizon. You walk into a Verizon carrier and you've got the big red check mark with this. So was it Solar Red? Was that the name of the red?
Yeah,
red.
Exactly.
The solar flare going off there. We've got a couple other tweets here from Renato Laporte, PN Weekly. I think that in 1 year, we won't be seeing relevant HTC devices anymore unless they partner with somebody else. Someone also kind of piggybacking on my hypothesis that flagship grade stuff is probably going to be living more and more at Google. And then what's left is probably going to be servicing what you were saying, the desire market and the mid-ranger market. Do you think, this is from Peter Hayton, do you think HTC will still try to make phones themselves, or will they focus their efforts on their more profitable areas like Vive? And TK, I mean, if they just carve everything up, then HTC's gone and it's just the Vive company, essentially.
Yeah.
going on to live on after the phoenix out of the ashes of HTC.
Exactly. And I mean, there's been even rumors that the Vive division may be up for grabs at some point. So it truly is looking like HTC is looking to divide and conquer. Basically, we're not trying to be the masters of all tricks. We know we do really well on the Vive. The Pixel division at Google works great. Let's just do what works for them. And I think it's a good way to keep it. But unfortunately, it could mean the end of the HTC brand as we all remember it.
Yeah. From Juan Salazar, are we going to see faster updates for HTC devices? My feeling is probably no.
Yeah.
Not with more talent living at Google. I wouldn't count on that being such an open line of communication.
You'll have to move over to a Pixel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want HTC, it is.
Yeah,
right?
it's exactly. You're getting HTC and you're getting those updates.
And lastly, and this is for both of you guys, for both you, Jules, and for you, TK. This is from Najib. I've got the Pixel. What's your recommendation on going with Pixel 2, or should he wait for the Pixel 3?
I mean, if we're talking about this, we have the Pixel 2 XL, I believe was the leaked name of it, which is going to be LG, and it's going to have the screen, the 2x1 screen display. I think that's worthy of looking at, and we've also talked about pricing, which has stayed the same relative to last generation's Pixel. So if anything, there is no guarantee that the Pixel 3 will, not cost $750 or $850. That's my take.
So from my approach to it, I'm looking at it from a spec point of view. The reality is, I think year after year, what we see from Pixel devices or even updates, we see a small spec bump from one we had from last year on the Pixel XL and the Pixel. I think realistically, if you're happy with what you have with the Pixel XL, you're still going to get those updates. You're still going to be on the cutting edge, getting those new versions of Android when they come out, the betas and so on. I would probably say stay with the Pixel XL as you have and wait till the Pixel 3, because that's probably where you're going to start seeing some of the new things coming out, is when, HTC and Google have had about a year to sit together and work under the same umbrella and produce, because that'll be the, Gen 1 of this merger, or not merger, but this borrowing of staff. Partnership. Yeah. Partnership. I think that would be my opinion.
I agree, and especially because I think last year's phones have aged far better than phones of previous generations.
Exactly.
That if you can hold it out, I mean, we're pretty confident we're going to be getting the narrower aspect ratio, the Qualcomm 835 or some variants close enough in terms of Qualcomm 835 performance, and you're losing the headphone jack. I feel like you could probably look at the next year, the Pixel 3, as being, more of like the Apple TikTok. That's where we'll probably see a more substantial improvement to the guts of the phone. Yep. And from there, moving forward, exactly like you were saying, TK, I think we'll see more the fruits of this team working with Google. The first Pixel, it definitely shows that it was very much a rushed product, trying to fit a certain market demographic in under 9 months. I mean, babies take longer to make than the first Pixel was created. So Pixel 2, I think, is a better representation of what these teams can do working together, but the true test will be Generation 3. And that also goes back to my overall hypothesis that that's when I think consumers are really going to be taking Google seriously as a first-party manufacturer. So I think that's where we're apt to see something even more exciting coming out of this partnership.
For sure.
Indeed. I cannot wait for that. But in the meantime, we have plenty of other news to talk about. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump right in here for the week of September 18th, 2017. This is all the news that's fit to podcast. According to an analyst at Raymond James, Apple has yet to begin true mass production on the iPhone 10 that's set to ship in November. It's not clear how his claims are built, but it goes against the high street grain that right around now, mid-September. The Huawei Mate 10 is supposedly going to come in 4 flavors: a main model, a Pro version, a very capable light model, and perhaps a Porsche design edition, much like how we've seen the Mate 9 come out. Pricing for the main model and the Pro is set to stretch between iPhone 8 and iPhone 10 territory. So between those two, we're talking about $650 to $1,150, which is kind of a uncharted or rarely charted territory for this kind of caliber of phone in China, at least. T-Mobile has raised its deprioritization.
That's easy for you to say.
So yeah, say that 10 times. Sorry.
32 gigabytes to 50 gigabytes. That's the amount of data used in a month before the carrier decides to throttle customers' speed in high traffic situations. It has gone up 4 times since the introduction of its T-Mobile One unlimited data offer, and this most recent raising happened after it introduced its free Netflix on Us deal. And finally, the Moto X4 has been introduced the U.S. as the U.S.'s first Android One phone, and with it, Project Fi's first as well. The Google MVNOs is taking pre-orders for the $400 device through October 5th. Meantime, the minimalist Android One program is set to expand in this country in the very near future. So I've already placed my pre-order for one of those babies. I feel like I'm going to get a good workout. It's going to replace the Nexus 5X. I've had that on a other account that I don't use that often at all, and I feel like it's just going to be just much more of a fit. I'm sad to see the Moto Assist suite and all the other Moto features go away, but I mean it is what it is I feel.
Yeah, this is actually one of the most exciting moves, I think, for Project Fi, is just getting another phone in the lineup. And I really liked our first hands-on. So if you catch our video of the Moto X4 here on the Pocketnow YouTube channel, it's terrible. It's maybe one of the worst looking videos we've ever shot. And it was because the product reveal that we had in Berlin was like this like dark club lighting
dance floor ever.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, it was fun, but it was terrible because in the arena that we're in, it was difficult to see the phone, let alone to try and also shoot video of it. And so that was a big bummer. But actually having the phone in my hands, I was very impressed with what Moto was doing for the X4. So this is an excellent way to introduce a mid-ranger for Project Fi, not just having people like, well, if you want a less expensive device, you can maybe try and find a used Nexus, and that's what you can use for Project Fi. This is so much better to have a legit first-party offering, a new product, which will begin a life cycle of support and updates, current internals, current chipset, current cameras, and now it's also a more viable strategy for Project Fi for those of us who are looking at an inexpensive way to provide service for a phone.
No, definitely. And Jules, to even though it's sad to see some of these features go away, it would make the ability to update that device a much easier process for Google or even for Motorola, because there's less work for them to do. It's kind of like a, hey, you have something new, here you go. It should be a much better experience.
All these features should be in the OSP, and that way it'd be easier. And I mean, these should be. It's like stock Plus situation should just be stock, and that could be said the same for One Plus in some situations. Personally, I don't feel like that's my taste, but hey, I think it's a fair addition.
You know what would be really exciting is if Motorola goes through all of this Google licensing stuff to deliver this Android One handset for North America, and then like the next day on Google Play, there's a Motorola accessory pack that you can download. It just includes all this stuff. Because I mean, the additions are so simple. They're not crazy intrusive.
They should do that. That is, I'm not sure why you haven't been. You're not applying for a job.
Well, but I mean, it was a part of what HTC did. I mean, not as directly or not as boldly, but I mean, like every individual component of HTC's sense really was just a separate. It was broken up, and you download your camera update directly through Google Play. I don't see where Motorola couldn't replace this functionality just by leaving a couple software holes open that then just plug right in. through stuff that you can download.
I mean, there are obvious advantages to kernel level adjustments like that, but I mean, I don't know. I mean,
but that's also why I think that could be a fun play. I doubt they're going to do it because they don't want to rock the boat with Google. But the additions that Motorola brings, I mean, one of the great things about having used the Z2 was there was just this one Motorola app where all of that stuff lived now. It wasn't like you had a bunch of disparate, separate services and apps that needed to be updated across the kernel. It was just this one, here's everything, you can find it right here. And I know the app doesn't really work that way. I mean, there are a bunch of individual components that need to be updated. But if you could get to a point where it was just one accessory pack APK, that would be super nice for people that wanted to replace that functionality.
No, I think it's Samsung's done it in the past too. I don't know if you guys have heard it when the S7 and the S6, they used to have a productivity pack and an audio music playback pack. They used to sell extra packages they used to download off of their Play Store or off the Samsung store.
Apps.
Or specific made for Galaxy. Or so the reality is a lot of these modifications, like Jules explains, it's not that hard. You're right. There are some of them that do require kernel level modification for it to even work. Specifically with the always on display, the tap to wake, the gestures and so on. Those things are not as simple as a simple APK, but we've seen development done from other companies that have introduced it to even low-end devices. So it's not uncalled for. And you mentioned OnePlus. OnePlus is a perfect example. They keep it very lean. It's in there and it's baked in. And there's also a big development support behind it. And hopefully Motorola can capitalize on that. Provide a vanilla device and you can add your toppings later.
Now, I want to circle back to Huawei just because I'm getting crazy anxious about the Mate 10 reveal, but this is making me a little nervous. Seeing so many different leaks about so many different product lines and so many different pieces. And one of the things that was really nice about the Mate 9 was that it launched pretty simply. I mean, it was the Mate 9, the Mate 9 Porsche design, which eventually became the Mate 9 Pro. But at launch, it was two major phones and then just two different flavors of phone per the launch. Do we think that Huawei might be biting off more than they can really chew, or at least biting off more than they can properly communicate to consumers with their mouths full from biting off too much?
And especially at this threshold where they're transitioning to 2x1 and also they're adding on water resistance for the first time, I think, in series history. Yeah, that's a pretty crazy from what these leaks are telling us, and they're all 6-inch devices. And I mean, supposedly they Mate 10 Lite or what was it, the Maimang 6 or G10 or whatever. They have.
You've already lost me. Yes, I agree.
But they're all in that range. They're all very, they're all supposed to sport the top end 970 and these big batteries, and that there's a baseline experience, and then there's like the rest of it, which just adds on and adds on and adds on in terms of hardware. And I don't know how much we're going to get for that much more money is what I'm saying, other than storage. And if the DRAM market is to be believed, it is still definitely a hard time out there.
No, and TK, isn't there some merit to the conversation about having like 10 different SKUs as opposed to shipping one or two really well-refined products instead, like dividing up your manufacturing lines into all of these separate products, some of them selling better than others, some of them dedicated to certain regions, most of them never coming here to the United States.
I was just about to jump on that. And the reality is the flavors that we're looking at could potentially be for different markets. We're not looking for, let's say there's 4 different versions of it, the regular, the high end, and then the 2 mid-rangers. The reality is those probably end up being in different markets. There's the European market, there's the Asian market they're going to be getting in there. I think Huawei's approach in the US has changed slightly from last year. What we've seen this year is a very big approach into Europe. We've had the Mate 9 in the US and we've had nothing else. And if we want to talk Huawei, we can talk about Honor a little bit, maybe. And Honor didn't bring, the Honor 9 didn't come to the US the way the Honor 8 came last year.
Well, that's with bated breath that for AT&T to do something early next year, because we've been talking about those rumors as well. But I mean, you do have a point there.
Yeah, and that's the approach. I think they're focusing headstrong. I think they have the let's put it this way. They have the R&D department to be able to fit all of this into a handheld device that could perform well. They need to market it at the right level and price it correctly. I think we're going into this beginning of 2018 or end of 17 of the $1,000, close to $1,000 phone.
Yeah.
And it's becoming, when do we want to basically go over? And I got to turn off Google Now behind me because she's answering the questions. Dang it.
Well, and also, when we're looking at some of these rumors, though, that the starting price for a Mate 10, you know, we're talking about a 4 gigabytes of RAM and a 64 gigabyte storage variant starting under $700 US could be a compelling way to say, we do have the $1,000 option if you want this Mate 10 Pro / Porsche design experiment thing. If you want to show that off, you can. But I like this idea of a big, bold, powerful device that starts at what a flagship phone used to cost.
And with an amazing chipset. We're talking the SoC on this, the 970. We've seen a lot of good stuff on it. And the Mate 9, I still love it. I've had it since the beginning of January.
I still use my Mate 9 every day, yeah.
It's amazing audio playback, amazing camera on the back. There you have the dual sensor set up with Leica branding. Okay, you win.
Okay. And I don't mean to party poop here, but, you know, we're talking about Huawei and its native country, and, you know, we're going to expect a little bit more to go on in terms of bringing it over to the U.S.
I wholly expect that this, you know, we're just doing the exchange rate. So the rumor is that it would be, what, 4,300.
Yeah, and that is high for, you know, I mean, if you're talking about a market that's saturated with Xiaomi and Meizu and all that, that's, you know, that's still a very big ask. And, you know, comparing it to
the direct exchange rate is just $650. I wholly expect that, let's say they managed to pull a worldwide launch, that it would easily be, what, a $749 device? You could easily add $100 to that price tag and still have a device more than capable of competing against the flagship products that have been released this year, let alone undercutting other large screen options like the Galaxy S8 Plus, the Note 8, and the iPhone 10, easily undercutting those products.
I really hope that they take it, you know, it's going to be a soft launch, and before the whole AT&T thing, I hope that that's going to be like when they really push it. They really push it.
What do you mean by you hope it's a soft launch? You mean ramping up, like launching in just a couple countries and then bringing it to the US when they have a carrier strategy? Or
yeah, just China, and or just like even giving out just a simple press release.
I mean, like the conversations we've been having with LG recently, like, hey, brah, LG V30, when's it really gonna come?
yeah, that's true. But I mean, you get my point. It's going to happen. I really believe it's going to happen. And if they can communicate all that to the proper audience, I think we have a good running strategy.
All some big ifs, because those are definitely criticisms we've had for a number of manufacturers, and not the least of which LG and HTC and Motorola, in how they communicate with their customers. Real quick, just want to wrap up sort of the news block with the iPhone 10 story. How much faith do we want to put into this report? It seems a little sketchy that Apple would have put such a hard deadline for the phone's release at their keynote, and then someone else, you know, maybe with good credibility, maybe not, we don't know, speaking to this point, as you know, the thing that bothers me is the line that they haven't started mass production. That to me is worrying, but shouldn't there be evidence of that? Like, shouldn't we be able to look that up somehow?
And all we've had are just little paper trails from component manufacturers back in, I think, mid-August or so, that signal that there's a big rise in activity, and presumably, I mean, they're all Apple suppliers, so that's going to be the case here, that you can attribute that to that. But in terms of actual like Foxconn, because it still all has to be assembled. You can have all the parts, but you have to actually go through with the mixing of the ingredients, if you will. Yeah, I'm puzzled on that front, especially if we're talking about making sure that everything fits together I mean, it is challenging with the new like curved glass and the display. You know, those are sensitive parts, especially.
Yeah, I mean, especially for fitting it all together. I heard Tim Cook took the iPhone and threw it into a glass of water, and when he saw air bubbles, he was like, "There's more room in there."
Yeah,
there's more room out.
Well, I mean, or he could just go into, you know, Good Morning America and say that 99 is a value price for the technology that you're getting. But there's still room there.
Right. For the most forward-thinkingest phone ever created. TK, do you think that this would harm Apple if there was a delay? Do you think?
No. It sadly, I think if anything, it would be feeding the beast. It's only going to make the demand even higher. I mean, we all
go as far as it wants, but until the supply actually catches up, and that's the inference here is that we should be taking out is that December it's still going to be weeks and weeks and months.
And people are going to be waiting for orders and try to buy it, and it's been this way. The only thing I can say for sure is we're probably going to all be able to get iPhone 8s by December if we want them, and the reality is everybody's waiting for the X, and the demand's going to be so high that even if this was not true and they did start ramping up, they cannot stay ahead of the demand, and there's always going to end up being a shortage. So it doesn't hurt them; it just keeps people talking about them, and I think it's a good thing. I'm looking forward to seeing the iPhone 10s, iPhone X. The reality is, probably won't be able to see it for quite some time, you know, because it is going to sell out. You know, I think Apple has a way of approaching things. It's supply and demand, right? They already knew that the iPhone 8 was not going to be the performer, so you know we didn't hear one big issue from them saying, "Oh my God, the sales of the iPhone 8 is not working," because I think they realize this is where it's coming. So I think they're ramping up. They are going to run out before the holiday, and before we know it, we're all going to be like, "Where's my iPhone 10? And why hasn't it shipped yet?"
Right. In terms when you're comparing halves of business, you know, the first half for Apple starts in the holidays, goes into the spring, and that's when they sell the most iPhones. So they have that routine drilled into these customers. You know, every 2 years you get a new iPhone. It's at this time, boom, you have it. And when you're stretching that out to more of the spring quarter instead of like the actual holidays when everyone has the budget set aside for gifts and all that, I don't know. I really don't know if it's you know, it's a mission critical device, of course, but you're still when you need it now. when thing's broken, you need it.
On that one, Jules, is I think we've been in a holding. A lot of iPhone fans have been in a holding pattern. So whatever funds they might have been dedicating towards, you know, an iPhone 7 or
they could redirect it to an iPhone 8,
and that they're just sort of sitting on that. I can tell you, I have so many family members that are still rocking like iPhone 5S's, kind of waiting to see what might come. And the iPhone 6 to iPhone 7 transition didn't really seem to do it for them. That's, you know, 2 years of not paying off a phone on a contract that they haven't had to spend on a device. So this notion that they're going to be spending $40 a month when they finally do get it isn't quite so devastating once these iPhone 10 start shipping.
Exactly. We're going to see a lot of subsidy that's going to bring down that $1,000 price. And I think that's what they're banking on. A lot of Apple's processes. Look, yeah, we said it's $1,000, but the reality is a lot of people are going to be financing it, either leasing it. If you do it, let's say T-Mobile jump on demand.
Or Apple directly, yeah.
Yeah, or even go through the... so
I
that's...
mean, sorry, I mean, I'll go into this with the iPhone 5S and even like the iPhone 4S as kind of the big fringe audience that we're trying to get with the super cycle that analysts have been talking about. And trade-in programs have only extended either towards the iPhone 6 or iPhone 5S. So at this point, what is it to people that you're getting $5 or $10 a month off when your 5-year-old iPhone is not even worth anything anymore? And unless there is like an actual upfront subsidy, no strings attached, I don't think it makes sense.
But that's why I think these leasing programs have been effective, is because instead of it being an upfront subsidy, it's just you don't pay anything. It's like literally zero, and then it just shows up on your bill. We've got a couple tweets here from Renato Laporte. PN Weekly, remember the first global iPhone, months of waiting. Well, here we go again. And immediately after, from David Baptista Silva, Apple always does that by producing short supplies. They assure that the market does not lower the price of the iPhone. It prevents the iPhone from immediately becoming a commodity like Android manufacturers can sometimes run into.
Exactly.
Maybe
it's like, by design.
Unless eBay's like never MSRP starts, you know, hey, $500 iPhone 10.
Well, we had some Motorola news. You know, like I said, I was really excited about Project Fi. There was another Motorola story that we want to unpack a little bit too. And actually, another reason why I'm really glad you're on this week's podcast, TK, is because we're talking about software support. Jules, can you talk us just through the basics real quick on this renewed promise from Motorola on the G4 Plus?
So, hold on, I have to simulate the whole button for it. That would be our top spot. I meant sounder. If I had the soundboard.
I'm really glad you don't have the soundboard. I need more Jules like bebop scat. Bebop, doobop, doobop.
Okay, so what we're talking about here is the Moto G4 Plus. Now, originally, there was marketing material for it on its website, Motorola's website, that said that it would be updated to both Android N and O. And it goes against what Motorola has previously said, or has previously put down as its policy. Moto G series phones, these mid-rangers, will only get 1 year of OS updates, which, you know, kind of surprises us. But, you know, in the whole scheme of things, when you're dealing with a portfolio of 12 phones, and a lot of them are already top-end devices, you have these other mid-range and lower-end devices that you have to deal with. All right, fine. You can triage. It's like that. That's fine. At least to me it is. But so now that they've been caught, with this material, and they changed it post-mortem, people are saying, or have been complaining, hey, you should probably fix this or do this. And Motorola came out and said, you know what? You're right. We're going to back up our promise. And even though it's going to be on an indefinite basis, on an untimed basis, there's no strict guideline as to when we'll do it. We'll do it. So now that makes the Moto G4 Plus as the 13th phone that they'll have to update to Android Oreo in the near future. Everyone else is going to be first, I suppose, because it'll take the least amount of time to do. But I guess the first question, and we'll go up and down with this one. Should the Moto G series get 2-year OS update supports? And I think
so that's immediately what I was gonna jump in with, Jules, is because I don't know that I don't know that I've ever paid attention enough to see where it was disclosed that the G was only supposed to get one major OS update.
Yeah.
Okay. So has that been something in your experience where like they disclose that? Like this is
hasn't get. Yeah, no. The general rule has always been 2 years of OS update. That's the unwritten rule by most providers, and I think it was set by Google, because Google is the one who started saying, "Look, we'll support these devices for a certain number of updates, probably 2 revisions of Android." And supporting mid-rangers, it shows dedication from the company if they want to be able to do it. But as you said, Jules, the requirement for such a big portfolio of devices to get updated every year is going to be very taxing on the company, and especially since
Samsung. I mean, hello, we have A's and J's and other letters that I don't even think exist anymore.
And again, they have so many flavors of their devices, and so very few of those get updates. And even when they do receive the updates, you know, it's so long, you may have already gotten rid of the device, you don't even have it anymore. Is it good PR? Yes. Should it be done? Definitely. I think people would appreciate it. They would feel like they have value in their device, and it's going to get the next Android version. I mean, because Apple still supports it, even though it's an older device. They have a set timeline and they support it. Is it functional from the manufacturing as far as from a company's point of view? It's a little hard to justify it. I think, as you said, they got caught with that statement. It's something they have to stick to. The G4 Plus, for me, was a great device for what it did and the price point. It did overheat for me. I'm hoping software can fix that issue for us. But you know, at some point you have to kind of, from a company standpoint, you have to move on. And people that have the G4 are not really looking for updates for Android. They look for a budget device that had a big screen, 1080p display, a decent camera on it, a nice enough battery, because it was the high end of the G4 series, right? You had the Play, the G4, and the G4 Plus. And it's nice to see that one moving on. And it could get people to, think of maybe the next series of G devices will get it.
So, I mean, I've got a personal stake in this because I've got a couple family members who are on G4s. So G4 Pluses specifically. And so, yeah, Motorola needs to give them like 10 years of software support as far as I'm concerned. But one of the things that I think I kind of want to fight you on, TK.
Okay.
Someone who might be buying a budget device, you're probably right that they're not looking for bells and whistles, and they're trying to achieve something, and they're trying to achieve it at a certain price point. But one of the things increasingly, as we come to depend on our portable electronics more, so much of our lives, personal data being lived out of these devices, more than any other tier, I feel budget and mid-rangers need to have multiple years of proper software support, not just for bug fixes and patches, but also for the operating system. When I started doing this podcast, it was almost 2 years ago, we were talking about an army of Samsung Galaxy S3s that were still being used around the world, and were these huge security exploits, because they were just off the reservation for any kind of support from the manufacturer and from Google. And if a company is going to quietly disclose that, oh no, this is the line of phones that only gets one major operating system update, I think that needs to be a bigger deal.
Yeah.
That erodes a lot of confidence in a brand that I trust for this sort of entry to mid-range product. The Moto G series is something that I've always pointed family and friends to, because it's a reputable brand. It's a brand with some recognition. Everyone remembers Motorola. They make great products, and they should be well supported. If I can take should be well supported off the list, there's no incentive for me to recommend a Motorola over a Huawei, over a budget LG, over a Desire, over any other solution that might come at the same price tier, and will probably also deliver more compelling hardware at that price tier at the same time.
It's something that they should have it, like, as you said, they should be more forthcoming with the information. You should see it as basically at the same level as, does it have a great camera? Does it get support? Does it have great audio? Does it have a good display? It's something that you need to basically factor into when you're buying a device, because when we say mid-range is such a big gap from very budget friendly to a feature phone, over to a device that is capable, like you said, like the G series, and you should make a decision based on that. And then think, as we move forward in time, support for devices doesn't end with the manufacturer, and there is other options down on the market. But from a standard, as far as what you're saying, if you say you're buying it for a family friend, your mom, your friend, your brother, your cousin, you want to make sure that they're well taken care of, and you're not losing on that, because 9 times out of 10, we're tech support for all of those people. So we got to know what we're doing, right? Because they're going to come back to you and say, hey, Juan, so, what's up with the security flaw that's all over the news? So my hope would be is that they're able to provide patches more periodically and more consistently, to be able, at least the security patches. But maybe Android OS updates, I don't think it's that bad to say, look, we'll definitely upgrade you to the next version, because within a year, there's usually at least a version of Android. But outside of that, it's hard to justify, because, like I said, it's a mid-ranger. You didn't buy into the continuous support, the continuous update, and so on. And then you have to factor.
Well, and there is probably also some concern that second year of updates, if you're on a Qualcomm 615, you're probably not getting the best performance. I totally appreciate that. I think maybe that you nailed it for me is, where's the disclosure? Yeah, because I mean, a part of this press release too is, we made a mistake with our marketing materials, and you're like, yeah, I guess, maybe, sure, but there's a responsibility to the consumer that they know what information is at stake here, what information possibly could have been a mistake, because so many other players in the market, you buy a phone, and consumers aren't looking at this like, I bought a mid-ranger. They're looking at this like, I bought a phone.
Yeah, it's a brand new phone.
They look at their friends with an Apple phone, and it gets 4 or 5 operating system updates. By the end of that chain of updates, the iPhone is barely usable, but it's still got the OS update.
Yeah.
And then they look at their own product and they hear, there's that sort of osmosis, like, oh, there was a security exploit. There was the broad pawn. There was another operating system exploit. And then to know that, oh, well, because I somehow bought a cheap phone for $300, now I have to take care of it all on my own is not really an acceptable solution for anyone these days.
No, as I think it's as long as they know what they're getting into, you're right. At least you know what you're doing and what your expectations should be.
I do want to turn this question around to the future, because as we're going along, hopefully Android and its OEM partners and even the carriers are going to start implementing Project Treble, and they're going to be able to make simpler links to code from old to new. And you would hope that people start taking up this whole scheme. Does this give them less of an excuse from that point to just start updating all of their devices at in a timely fashion? What do you think?
So I'll start by saying it's not going to give them more. It's not going to be less of an excuse. I think if anything, they're probably going to stick to their own mechanism of saying, look, we're going to support certain things to a certain way. We're going to keep producing it. I think till we have full-on support for the way updates can be pushed out more incrementally, as opposed to being this big overdue of the entire system. Because what we forget is, I know with Motorola and with the G devices, these are unlocked devices, so you're not getting that much carrier stuff. Because Google can push an update, Motorola can push an update, but if Verizon doesn't update the Z Force on Verizon with their version of Android, which takes more time, you're going to get these little slowdowns and whatever hiccups they have. T-Mobile does the same thing. So we always want to keep in mind is, yes, it could help. I think it's going to definitely improve the experience. They can definitely promise more if they're willing to put the support behind it. But we also need telcos. We need OEM, not OEMs, but providers to start simplifying their code, simplifying their add-ons, so that it doesn't become this overhaul of an update that looks so different from one carrier to another to the same device, essentially.
Yeah, when we were going through all of the Project Fuchsia rumors, for example, and what future operating system Google might be looking at for mobile devices and what that might resemble, I hate to say it, but I think this is a consumer argument in favor of maybe making the wide open nature of Android a little bit more restrictive and putting more of the onus and control under Google in a way that maybe Microsoft is responsible for updating their products more than the manufacturers of Microsoft products. Exactly. And if that means we lose a little flexibility and it upsets some of Google's manufacturing partners that their skins can't be quite so invasive, so be it. I think we're seeing a few steps in that direction with Android O, Google mandating that partners have to use the power management settings of Android O to restrict background processes. I think a few more of those moves might actually empower Google to take some of the heavy lifting off of manufacturers and carriers and support more directly with the consumers using their software. And I think that would probably be the best. I mean, this is a long-term solution, and it will probably mean a future operating system, not necessarily Android, for it to be executed this way. But I kind of think that's the best way to go about maintaining security, actually delivering updates. And again, for all of our excitement over features in Android O, who's going to be using it in 6 months? How many people will really have access to all of this cool new stuff? And it's a shockingly tiny fraction of the Android market as a whole. This is not a good position for Google to be in if they're going to keep pushing products and services.
No, definitely. It's we're far away, where we have years before we can see a true adoption of all these things that we're looking at right now. Pixel devices have that benefit, but the reality is, Google needs to put a better structure for updates. And the fact that 90% of the skins that we see, as you said, at least from an enthusiast standpoint, I replaced the front-end launcher. I'm not a big fan of most launchers. Nova gets on my device, Nova Prime. I have my setup correctly. And I appreciate what they try to do. But I do want to say one thing in Google's defense, at least, or even as a nice little bonus. They've been learning. year after year, all these nice features that we've seen, the split screen, the better audio processing, or even the display, just to be able to hold up your device and be able to see your notifications. Those things have been adopted and actually built into the OS now, that we can truly appreciate it. So it's taking some of these things back. Unfortunately, manufacturers disable these. You have to go in there and you lose some of these things that you want. The split screen, I think LG did it really nicely. They stopped developing their split screen functionality, I think, on the V20, and they said, look, Google did it. We don't need to do it. Let's just take theirs and move forward.
It was actually rolled out as an update.
Yeah.
So I mean, there was this weird little pocket I think with the G5. They stopped implementing their own version of split screen, even though the phone didn't have the update yet.
And I looked for it. I didn't understand it at the time, but it makes perfect sense. So I think it will help a lot of other manufacturers. I don't know if Samsung will be taking any pages from that book, but at least for LG, could be HTC down the road, and also maybe with Huawei as well. There's going to be a much easier path for them to update and provide better support for their devices.
Also, I just feel like in terms of this whole climate of cybersecurity, there's a morality argument at play that I think has largely been overlooked, where the people who are most economically disadvantaged are also the people who are going to be the easiest targets. Continuously moving forward. And if a major company doesn't come out ahead of this, it means huge swaths of the population of this planet are going to be increasingly left out in the cold when it comes to things like security and support. But on that note, on that happy note, when we're talking about phones and things that are exciting, I do want to hit the PN Weekly hashtag here on Twitter. Jules, you got some good tweets for me?
Yeah, I got Renata Laporte, who mentions morality. Moral of the day: don't make software support promises as a selling point. I think we've talked about that. We've talked against that point, I guess.
Or do, but just live up to your promises is, I guess, the moral of the story. Is if you're gonna sell something, actually deliver what you're selling.
The David Baptista Silva, leasing subsidies, etc. Those only exist in the U.S. Around the world, nobody else really does that. Hence, Apple's low market share. And I would argue that Apple has started to drive deals with regional banks in those countries to start providing those options, those financing options, anyways. And even if they're not being taken up, I mean, they've always sold so much.
Well, they're definitely gaining ground on that. Definitely,
indeed. And Peter Hayton, I guess if anything, mid-range is often more important for software support, as many of these people benefit most from important updates. And I think that we can all agree with that. Android should be built in a way where security patches are pushed widely, directly by Google.
Yeah.
And then also from Peter Hayton, I think this is an interesting point too, because I don't know if it works in the positive, but I know it works in the negative. His opinion that good software support for a mid-ranger shows real care and can help sell a flagship. But I don't, it's like one of those things, when things go right, people don't seem to notice or to care. I mean, it's just sort of a foregone conclusion if you have an iPhone that you're going to be getting support. And so it's NBD when these updates finally do arrive. And a lot of people actually get annoyed, like, oh, I got to update my phone again. But when the negative happens, again, like what we were talking about, if Motorola is really making it one major update for a mid-range phone, that actually gives me pause as to whether or not I would recommend other Motorola products. If it turns out in the negative, like your phone got no support, it's way less likely that I'd recommend a more expensive product from that manufacturer if that's how they treat their customers.
No, that's totally agreeing. Exactly. It's the experience. It's how you build the loyalty from your customers. You need to give them what they're looking for and make sure that, it's working. If you're not paying attention to it, no news is good news kind of thing. You want to be in that position. Most of us want to be there, because the moment you hear about a threat or a leak or something that goes through, says, look, there's a patch that needs to come through, but, oh, my device isn't supported, you're going to feel shortchanged. Yeah. And you're more than likely not going to go back to the same company when you upgrade. You're going to probably go somewhere else and try another manufacturer that has a better track. So hopefully, like Jules was saying, is I think it was the other tweet that mentioned, is that Google gets to a point where they're able to push security updates, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are pushing it out anyways to Verizon, T-Mobile, and so on. So if they can push it in directly to our devices and it just updates the system, I think it's a much better experience. And then if anything else, it creates value.
I mean, honestly, I understand why some of these things are, Qualcomm has these issues with the vulnerabilities, and some of those have to do with the radio and that going through the carriers anyways, but still, it's just, I don't know how, we're kind of stuck in this dilemma, but if you're able to see, if you're able to future-proof in any way, if you're able to, take a chance on an Android One or Pixel or whatever, I think we'll be much more better set up. If you're on the Android side, if you're on iOS, then we're already in that kind of mode. But
right, and a lot of that is that talking point, vote with your wallet, but it's getting people out of the mentality of being on team manufacturer, instead looking at what really is going to be the best product for me.
And whenever that happens, if you need to make a decision, Pocketnow will be there for you.
Like, Jules, is there like some kind of resource where people could have read all of these news stories that we were talking about this week?
You could go to pocketnow.com and hit the podcast section to find this post for all the stories that we've talked about. And you can also tune into YouTube and the Pocketnow Daily with Jaime Rivera. And that is every weekday at 9 p.m. Eastern.
And what if I want to read these stories, but I also speak Spanish?
That would be interesting. Yes.
Well, I would like to direct you to es.pocketnow.com. You can find Juan Carlos Bagnell, our host, on Twitter at SomeGadgetGuy. TK Bay is at TKDL8655. And I, your producer, am humbly at Pocketnow. Is available on the web, socially and digitally. Pocketnow.com, at Pocketnow, and on YouTube as well. And we wouldn't be here if it weren't for you, the listeners and viewers that have made the show possible for 5 years straight. The Pocketnow Weekly is back with more technology goodness next week, so make sure you tune back in.
Nicely done.